The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of New Haven as Dr. Lisa Carter checked her equipment one last time. The frontier colony world had been humanity's home for 3 years now, but they had barely scratched the surface of what this planet held. Today's mission would take her team deeper into the Northern Territories than any human had gone before. "Are you sure about this, Lisa?" asked Jake Morrison, adjusting the straps on his field pack. The marine biologist had volunteered for the expedition despite having no real business in a cave system. His specialty was ocean life, but his curiosity about alien creatures made him perfect for this kind of work. Lisa nodded as she powered up the portable scanner. "The energy readings from those caves are unlike anything we've seen. If there's some kind of ecosystem down there, we need to know about it." Ryan Cooper, their security chief, was less enthusiastic. He checked his weapon for the 3rd time and frowned at the cave entrance ahead of them. "I still think we should wait for reinforcements. Going into unknown alien caves with just 4 people seems like a bad idea." "We'll be fine," Lisa said. "Dr. Rodriguez has studied every piece of data we have about this region. Amy, tell him what you found." Amy Rodriguez looked up from her tablet, where she had been reviewing geological surveys. "The cave system extends for miles underground. The rock formations suggest they're natural, but there are some unusual energy patterns. Nothing that indicates immediate danger, though." The team moved forward across the barren landscape. New Haven's northern region was mostly empty, except for strange crystal formations that jutted up from the ground like frozen lightning. The colonists had found these crystals useful for certain types of technology, but they had never found the source. As they approached the cave entrance, Jake whistled softly. "That's bigger than I expected." The opening in the mountainside was massive, easily large enough to fly a shuttle through. Smooth walls curved inward, and a faint blue glow emanated from somewhere deep inside. The air that drifted out felt warm and carried an odd metallic taste. "Stay close," Ryan said, taking the lead with his weapon ready. "And keep your comms open." They descended into the cave system, following a path that seemed almost deliberately carved. The walls were covered in crystalline formations that pulsed with soft light. The deeper they went, the more elaborate these formations became, until they were walking through what looked like a cathedral made of living crystal. "Lisa, you need to see this," Amy called from ahead. The team gathered around Amy, who was examining the cave wall with her portable light. Carved into the crystal surface were symbols and patterns that were clearly not natural. The markings seemed to flow and twist, forming complex designs that hurt to look at for too long. "These are definitely artificial," Lisa said, running her scanner over the symbols. "And old, really old." Jake touched one of the symbols gently. "They're still warm, like they're alive." Before anyone could respond, a sound echoed through the cave. It was musical, like someone singing, but the notes were too pure and too complex for human voices. The team froze as the sound grew closer. "Everyone, stay calm," Ryan whispered, raising his weapon. The singers appeared around a bend in the cave tunnel. They were tall and graceful, with pale skin that seemed almost transparent. Their bodies were thin and elongated, and they had large eyes that reflected the crystal light like mirrors. There were 6 of them, moving in perfect harmony with each other. One of the beings stepped forward and spoke in a voice like wind chimes. The words were completely alien, but the universal translator on Lisa's belt crackled to life after a moment. "You have entered the sacred temple," the translation came through in a monotone voice. "You must leave this place immediately." Lisa raised her hands peacefully. "We're explorers from the human colony. We didn't know this was your sacred place. We mean no harm." The lead being, who wore what looked like robes made of crystallized light, tilted its head. "You are the ones who fell from the sky, the builders of metal structures in the southern valleys." "Yes, that's us," Lisa said. "We're called humans. What do you call yourselves?" "We are the Zephyrians," the being replied. "I am Highkeeper Veltar. This temple has been our responsibility for over 1,000 of your years. The eternal guardian of the void sleeps in the deep chambers, and we are chosen to watch over it." Jake stepped forward, ignoring Ryan's warning gesture. Eternal Guardian? What kind of creature is it? The other Zephyrians made sounds of distress at Jake's casual tone. Veltar's large eyes narrowed. It is not a creature. It is a sacred being that chose our people as worthy guardians long ago. It slumbers in the deepest part of the temple, where no outsider may go. Amy pulled out her tablet and began taking notes. This is incredible. We're looking at a fully developed alien religion with ancient traditions. A religion built around some kind of sleeping alien, Jake added. I'd love to see what this guardian looks like. Impossible, Veltar said firmly. Only the highest. Keepers may enter the deep chambers and only during the most sacred ceremonies. Your presence here is already a violation of our most holy laws. The ground beneath their feet suddenly shook. Dust and small crystals fell from the cave ceiling as a deep rumbling sound echoed through the tunnels. The Zephyrians immediately began making urgent musical sounds to each other. What's happening? Ryan demanded, steadying himself against the cave wall. Lisa checked her scanner frantically. Seismic activity. Something big is moving underground. The rumbling grew stronger and the crystal formations began to glow brighter. Veltar and the other Zephyrians looked terrified as they sang out in their musical language. The universal translator struggled to keep up with their rapid, panicked communication. The Guardian stirs, Veltar said, his translated voice filled with fear. Your presence has disturbed the sacred sleep. This is catastrophe beyond measure. Another tremor shook the cave stronger than before. This time cracks appeared in some of the crystal formations, and the blue glow began to pulse like a heartbeat. We need to get out of here, Ryan said. But before anyone could move, a new sound filled the cave. It was like nothing any of them had ever heard. Part roar, part song, and part something that seemed to vibrate in their bones. The sound was massive, and ancient, carrying emotions that human minds could barely process. Curiosity, confusion, and something that might have been loneliness. The Zephyrians prostrated themselves on the cave floor as the sound grew closer. Footsteps thundered through the deep tunnels, each one making the entire cave system shake. Whatever was coming was enormous. The Guardian wakes, Veltar whispered. After 1,000 years of sacred sleep, it wakes. We are not prepared for this moment. Jake looked toward the deep tunnels where the sounds were coming from. Well, ready, or not, I think we're about to meet your guardian. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by that strange song that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Lisa grabbed her scanner, Amy clutched her tablet, and Ryan raised his weapon, though they all knew it would be useless against whatever was approaching. The crystal formations pulsed faster now, and the air in the cave began to shimmer with energy. Whatever the eternal guardian of the void was, it was almost here, and the 4 humans were about to become the first of their species to encounter it. The Zephyrians continued their prostrations, singing their own harmonious prayers, while the human team stood frozen between fear and fascination, as the most important moment in human-alien relations thundered toward them through the crystal depths of an ancient temple. The creature that emerged from the deep tunnels was beyond anything the humans had imagined. It stood 3 stories tall, with 6 powerful legs that ended in claws the size of dinner tables. Its body was covered in scales that looked like black glass, and massive wings folded against its back shimmered with colors that seemed to shift and dance in the crystal light. The head was somewhere between a dragon and a wolf, with intelligent eyes that glowed like distant stars. The Zephyrians remained flat on the ground, making low musical sounds that the translator couldn't process. High Keeper Veltar was trembling as he whispered prayers in his own language. Ryan Cooper had his weapon pointed at the enormous beast, but his hands were shaking. What do we do? He whispered. Lisa Carter was frozen in place, her scanner forgotten in her hand. The readings it was giving off were impossible. The creature seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Amy Rodriguez was the only one still thinking clearly enough to take notes, though her hands were shaking as she typed on her tablet. The massive creature looked down at the humans and Zephyrians with what seemed like confusion. It made a sound softer than before, almost like a question. Then it lowered its great head toward the group, Jake Morrison did something that made everyone else think he had lost his mind. He stepped forward. "Jake, don't," Ryan hissed, but Jake was already moving. The marine biologist approached the creature with the same calm confidence he used with nervous dolphins back on Earth. He kept his movements slow and his voice gentle. "Hey there, big guy," Jake said softly. "You just woke up, didn't you? That must be confusing." The creature tilted its massive head, studying Jake with those star-bright eyes. It made another sound, quieter this time, almost like a purr. "That's right," Jake continued, stepping closer. "We're not here to hurt anyone, we're just visitors." To everyone's amazement, the creature lowered its head further, bringing its face down to Jake's level. Jake reached out slowly and touched the smooth scales on what might have been the creature's cheek. The effect was immediate. The creature's eyes closed and it made a sound of pure contentment. It was exactly like a giant cat purring. "Well, aren't you just a big fluffy guy?" Jake said, scratching behind what looked like an ear. The universal translator picked up his words and broadcast them to the Zephyrians. Veltar's large eyes went wide with horror. "Fluffy?" Veltar gasped. "He calls the Eternal Guardian fluffy?" The other Zephyrians made sounds of distress, but the massive creature ignored them completely. It was too busy enjoying Jake's attention, leaning into his touch like an enormous pet. "Jake," Lisa called softly. "What are you doing?" "Same thing I do with any confused animal," Jake replied, still petting the creature. "Show it that we're friendly. Look at its body language. It's not aggressive, it's just curious and maybe a little lonely." The creature opened its eyes and looked at Jake with what could only be described as affection. Then it did something that made the Zephyrians wail in despair. It lay down on the cave floor and rolled onto its side, exposing its belly like a dog wanting a tummy rub. Jake laughed and actually did rub the creature's belly. The purring sound grew so loud it made the crystal formations vibrate. "This is wrong," Veltar said, struggling to his feet. "This is all wrong. The Guardian is sacred. It is divine. It does not play like a pet." "Maybe your Guardian just wanted a friend," Jake suggested, continuing to pet the massive creature. Over the next few days, the situation grew even more complicated. The creature, which Jake continued to call Fluffy, despite increasingly desperate protests from the Zephyrians, refused to return to the deep chambers. Instead, it followed Jake back to the human research camp. The colonists were understandably nervous about having a building-sized alien predator wandering around their settlement, but Jake's influence over the creature was undeniable. Fluffy stayed close to Jake at all times, following him around like a loyal dog. "This is insane," Ryan Cooper said as he watched Jake play fetch with Fluffy using empty cargo containers. "That thing could step on our entire base by accident." "But it won't," Jake replied, throwing another container. Fluffy bounded after it with surprising grace for something so large, caught it in its mouth, and brought it back with its tail wagging. "Look at it, Ryan. It's just happy to have someone to play with." Dr. Carter was trying to manage the diplomatic crisis this had caused. The Zephyrians had set up a camp near the research base and were performing elaborate ceremonies every day, trying to coax their sacred guardian back to the temple. "They're genuinely upset," Amy Rodriguez reported after spending hours with the Zephyrians. "Their entire religion is built around this creature. Having it act like Jake's pet is destroying their worldview." The ceremonies were impressive to watch. The Zephyrians would arrange themselves in complex patterns and sing in perfect harmony, creating music that seemed to make the air itself shimmer. Fluffy would watch these performances with interest, sometimes even humming along, but always returned to Jake's side when they were finished. Highkeeper Veltar grew more desperate each day. "The prophecies speak of a chosen one who would bond with the Guardian," he explained to Dr. Carter through the translator. "But the chosen one was supposed to be one of us, not an alien creature who calls our most sacred being by a ridiculous name." Amy spent long hours studying Zephyrian culture, trying to find a solution. She discovered that their society was built entirely around their role as guardians of the sleeping creature. They had no military, no real government, beyond the religious hierarchy, and no purpose except to watch over their sacred guardian. "This is tearing their civilization apart," Amy explained to the team. If Fluffy doesn't go back to being their sleeping deity, they don't know what their purpose is anymore. Meanwhile, Jake was discovering just how extraordinary his new companion really was. Fluffy could phase through solid matter at will, passing through the base's walls like they weren't there. It could generate shields of pure energy that were strong enough to stop projectiles. Most amazing of all, it could fly, its massive wings, carrying it through the sky with incredible speed and grace. Want to go for a ride? Jake asked one evening, and Fluffy immediately lay down so Jake could climb onto its back. Flying on Fluffy was like nothing Jake had ever experienced. The creature moved through the air with perfect control, and somehow Jake could sense what it was thinking and feeling. There was a connection between them that went deeper than just friendship. During one of these flights, Jake began to see flashes of images that weren't his own memories. Ancient cities, strange technologies and creatures, like Fluffy but different somehow. The visions came and went quickly, but they left Jake with the feeling that Fluffy was much older and more important than anyone realized. The situation reached a crisis point when a group of younger Zephyrians, led by one called Warsinger Kethral, declared that the humans had corrupted their sacred guardian. They began sabotaging human equipment and threatening violence. The off-worlders have poisoned the Guardian's sacred mind, Kethral announced to his followers. They have turned our divine protector into their plaything. This cannot be allowed to continue. The extremist Zephyrians started sneaking into the human camp at night, damaging equipment and leaving threatening messages written in their flowing script. Ryan Cooper increased security, but he couldn't watch everywhere at once. We need to find a solution, Dr. Carter said during an emergency meeting. If this escalates into violence, people are going to get hurt. Jake sat outside the meeting room, with Fluffy's massive head resting in his lap. The creature seemed to sense the tension and was making soft, comforting sounds. "What do you think, big guy?" Jake asked quietly. "Your people are pretty upset about us being friends." Fluffy raised its head and looked at Jake with those star-bright eyes. For a moment, Jake could swear he heard a voice in his mind speaking without words. The voice seemed to say that change was coming, whether the Zephyrians were ready for it or not, and that Jake and Fluffy together would face challenges that neither could handle alone. Jake didn't know what that meant, but he had a feeling they were going to find out soon enough. The alarm that woke everyone at dawn was unlike anything the colonists had heard before. It wasn't the usual emergency signal from their base systems. This was coming from the Deep Space Monitoring Station, and it meant only one thing. Something big was heading toward New Haven. Captain Helen Brooks rushed into the command center, still pulling on her uniform jacket. The technician on duty looked pale as he pointed at the main display screen. "Ma'am, we're picking up massive energy signatures at the edge of the system," he reported. "Multiple contacts moving in formation. They'll be here in less than 3 days. Helen studied the readouts with growing dread. The approaching fleet was huge, at least 30 ships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. The energy patterns were completely alien, and the ships were moving faster than should have been possible. "Have we tried to communicate with them?" Helen asked. "Yes, ma'am. All frequencies, all standard greeting protocols. They're not responding to anything." Dr. Carter arrived at the command center just as the second wave of bad news came in. The technician's face went white as he read the new data. "Captain, we're getting information from the outer colonies. 3 systems have gone dark in the past month. No communications, no distress signals. They just stopped transmitting." Helen felt ice in her stomach. "Show me the pattern." The star map lit up with the locations of the silent colonies. Each one was along the same route that led directly to New Haven. Whatever was coming had been systematically wiping out human settlements. "Get me a channel to Earth Command," Helen ordered. "Priority 1 emergency and sound general quarters. Everyone needs to know what we're facing." Within an hour, the entire colony was in chaos. Families were packing essential supplies, and the EA evacuation ships were being prepared. But there was a problem. The colony's transport vessels could only carry half the population, and it would take multiple trips to get everyone to safety. "We don't have time for multiple trips," Helen told the emergency council. If that fleet is hostile, and I think we can assume it is, they'll be here before we can complete a full evacuation. Jake Morrison sat in the meeting room with Fluffy's massive form curled around the building outside. Through the windows, they could see the creature's concerned eyes watching the frantic activity in the colony. "What about our defenses?" asked Lieutenant Dan Miller, the colony's weapons officer. Helen shook her head grimly. "We have patrol ships and defensive satellites. Against 30 capital ships? We might as well throw rocks at them." Jake stood up. Suddenly, "What if we don't run?" Everyone stared at him. "Jake," Dr. Carter said carefully, "those ships destroyed 3 entire colonies. We're talking about thousands of people." "I know," Jake replied. "But running away won't save the people who can't evacuate in time, and it won't stop this fleet from hitting the next colony after us." Ryan Cooper crossed his arms. "What are you suggesting?" Jake looked out the window at Fluffy, who was watching him with those intelligent, star-bright eyes. "I'm suggesting we fight back. Fluffy isn't just some big pet. The things I've seen in our connection, the memories, I think Fluffy is a lot more powerful than we realized." Highkeeper Veltar, who had been included in the emergency meeting, made a sound of distress. "The Guardian is not a weapon. It is a sacred being of peace and protection." "Maybe," Jake said, "but protection sometimes means fighting." Over the next day, as the alien fleet drew closer, Jake spent every waking moment with Fluffy, trying to understand the creature's true capabilities. The visions were coming more frequently now, and they were clearer. He saw ancient battles among the stars, fought between creatures like Fluffy and ships that looked terrifyingly similar to the approaching fleet. He saw civilizations rising and falling, and always, the creatures like Fluffy were there trying to maintain some kind of balance. "You've done this before, haven't you?" Jake asked as they sat together outside the colony. "You've fought these things." Fluffy's response came not in words but in images and emotions. Jake saw flashes of a vast galactic war, fought long before humans had even discovered fire. The enemy was called the hegemony, a collection of species that conquered and enslaved entire worlds. They had been advancing across the galaxy for thousands of years. The creatures like Fluffy had once been part of something called the Architects, beings who maintained peace and balance. But most of the Architects had been destroyed in the ancient war. Fluffy was one of the last survivors, sleeping and waiting for someone worthy to help complete an important mission. "What mission?" Jake asked. But the answer came in feelings, rather than clear thoughts. Something about stopping the hegemony before they could reach the galaxy's core worlds, where billions of innocent beings lived. Dr. Carter found Jake that evening, sitting with his back against Fluffy's massive side. The creature was humming softly, a sound that seemed to calm everyone who heard it. "Jake, we need to talk," she said. "The evacuation ships are almost ready. Captain Brooks wants you on the first transport out." "I'm not leaving," Jake said simply. "Jake, be reasonable. You're not a soldier. You're a marine biologist. I'm also the only one who can communicate with Fluffy. And Fluffy might be the only thing that can stop this fleet." Lisa sat down beside him. "What aren't you telling us about that creature?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. "Fluffy isn't just some alien animal. It's like a living weapon, but not in a bad way. It was created to protect life, to maintain balance. The fleet that's coming, they're called the hegemony. They've been destroying civilizations for thousands of years." "How do you know all this?" "The connection we have. I see its memories and it sees mine. Fluffy has been waiting for someone to help it finish a job that started long before humans existed." Amy Rodriguez approached them carrying her tablet. "Jake, I've been studying the Zephyrian text that Veltar shared with us. Their prophecies mention something called the time of choosing, when their guardian would awaken to face a great darkness." "The hegemony," Jake said. "Maybe. But there's something else. The prophecies say the guardian can't fight alone. It needs a bridge between worlds to reach its full power." Jake felt Fluffy's attention focus on Amy's words. Through their connection, he sensed excitement and hope. "A bridge between worlds," Jake repeated. "Someone who can connect different species, different ways of thinking." Highkeeper Veltar appeared. Having overheard their conversation, The ancient texts speak of this, he admitted reluctantly. But we always believed the bridge would be one of our own people. Maybe it was never about what species the bridge was, Amy suggested. Maybe it was about finding someone who could truly bond with the Guardian. The next morning brought grim news. The alien fleet had been identified. Long-range scans showed ships that looked like a nightmare fusion of machinery and living tissue. They were broadcasting on all frequencies now, but the message was not one of peace. Inhabitants of this world, the transmission said in perfect human English, you will surrender immediately and prepare for integration into the hegemony. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your settlement. You have 12 hours to comply. Captain Brooks called an emergency meeting. That's it. Full evacuation starting now. Everyone who can fit on the transport ships leaves immediately. What about the people who can't get on the ships? Jake asked. The evacuation ships will make return trips, Brooks replied, but her voice lacked conviction. They all knew there wouldn't be time. Jake stood up. There's another option. Jake, no, Dr. Carter started. Fluffy and I can buy you time. Maybe we can't stop 30 ships, but we can slow them down long enough for everyone to get away. Ryan Cooper shook his head. It's suicide, Jake. Even if that creature is as powerful as you think, 30-to-1 odds are impossible. Maybe, Jake said. But doing nothing guarantees that innocent people die. Highkeeper Veltar spoke up unexpectedly. The Guardian was not meant to face this trial alone. If the human Jake Morrison is truly the bridge spoken of in prophecy, then perhaps we have been wrong about many things. What are you saying? Dr. Carter asked. I am saying that maybe the sacred Guardian has been waiting not for one of us, but for someone who could see it as both divine and friend, someone who could unlock its true purpose. Jake felt Fluffy's massive head nuzzle against his shoulder. Through their connection came a feeling of determination and something that might have been love. Then it's settled, Jake said. Fluffy and I will face the hegemony fleet. Everyone else gets to safety. You're not doing this alone, Amy said suddenly. The Zephyrians have abilities we don't fully understand. Their harmonic songs might be able to help somehow. Veltar looked surprised. You would ask us to participate in battle? We are a peaceful people. Sometimes, Jake said. Protecting peace means fighting for it. As the hegemony fleet entered the outer system, Jake Morrison prepared for the most important battle of his life, riding on the back of a cosmic entity that an entire species called sacred, but that he simply called his friend. The hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a swarm of metal insects. Each ship was the size of a city block, covered in spikes and organic-looking tubes that pulsed with sickly green light. They moved in perfect formation, 30 vessels, of destruction bearing down on New Haven. Jake Morrison sat on Fluffy's back, high above the colony, wearing the flight harness that engineer Ben Taylor had designed for him. The harness connected directly to Fluffy's bioelectric field, allowing Jake to share the creature's enhanced senses and reaction time, while keeping his human ability to think strategically. You ready for this, big guy? Jake asked, patting Fluffy's neck. The creature's response came through their mental link, a mixture of determination and ancient anger. Fluffy had fought the hegemony before, thousands of years ago, and it remembered what they did to peaceful worlds. Captain Brooks's voice crackled through Jake's communicator. Hostile fleet is moving into attack position. Jake, you still have time to evacuate with the others. Not happening, Jake replied. How many people are still on the ground? About 2,000. The transport ships can't carry everyone in one trip. Jake looked down at the colony below, where families were loading onto evacuation ships while others waited their turn. Children pressed their faces against the windows, staring up at the massive creature that had become their protector. Then we buy them the time they need, Jake said. The lead hegemony ship began broadcasting again. Your time has expired. Prepare for orbital bombardment. Any who surrender now will be processed for integration. All others will be eliminated. Integration, Jake muttered. I've seen what that means in Fluffy's memories. They turn people into slaves. Fluffy's wings spread wide, each one spanning nearly 100 meters. The creature's scales began to glow with inner light as ancient systems activated. Energy coursed through its body, and Jake could feel the power building. "Let's show them. What happens when they threaten our friends?" Jake said. They launched from the colony's landing pad with explosive force. Fluffy's massive wings caught the air, carrying them up toward the hegemony fleet with incredible speed. The sensation of flying through space on a living creature was beyond anything Jake had imagined. He could feel cosmic winds and energy currents that Fluffy navigated by instinct. The first hegemony ship they approached was a command vessel, bristling with weapons and scanning equipment. Jake could see alien figures moving behind its transparent sections, tall beings in armor that looked like it was grown rather than built. "Target their weapon systems," Jake said, and Fluffy responded instantly. The creature phased partially out of normal space, becoming translucent and ghostly. The hegemony ship's weapons fired, but the energy beams passed harmlessly through Fluffy's shifted form. Then Fluffy solidified and unleashed a blast of pure energy from its mouth. The energy beam struck the command ship's main weapon array, causing a series of explosions that rippled across its hull. Alarms began wailing from the damaged vessel as it fell out of formation. "Direct hit." Lieutenant Miller's voice came through the communicator from the colony's defense center. "Jake, their sensors can't get a lock on you when Fluffy phases like that." But Jake's celebration was short-lived. The other hegemony ships were already adapting to their attack. Smaller vessels, sleek and predatory-looking, separated from the main fleet and moved to surround them. "Void hunters," Jake whispered, the knowledge coming from Fluffy's ancient memories. "They're designed specifically to hunt architects." The Void Hunters moved differently than the larger ships. They twisted and flowed through space like living things, and their weapons made a sound that hurt to hear. When they fired, the beams seemed to tear holes in space itself. Fluffy dodged the first barrage, but Jake could feel the creature's discomfort. These weapons were designed to disrupt the phasing ability that made architects so hard to kill. "I need a new strategy," Jake said. But before Fluffy could respond, one of the Void Hunter beams clipped the creature's wing. The effect was immediate and terrible. Fluffy's phasing ability flickered and failed, and Jake felt pain shoot through their mental connection. The creature roared in anger and pain as they began to fall toward the planet's surface. "Fluffy!" Jake shouted, but the creature was fighting to stay airborne with a damaged wing. More Void Hunters closed in for the kill, their weapons charging with that horrible sound. Jake could see the alien pilots through their ship windows, beings with too many eyes and mouths full of sharp teeth. Then something unexpected happened. A sound rose from the planet below, beautiful and pure and impossibly complex. The Zephyrians were singing. Highkeeper Veltar and dozens of his people had arranged themselves in a perfect circle around the colony's central plaza. Their voices joined together in harmonies that made the air itself shimmer with energy. The song was one of their most ancient and sacred pieces, meant to call upon their guardian in times of great need. The effect on Fluffy was immediate. The creature's damaged wing began to glow, and Jake felt power flowing through their connection like never before. Fluffy's phasing ability returned, stronger than ever, and the pain from the Void Hunter beam faded away. The harmony is amplifying Fluffy's natural abilities. Amy Rodriguez's voice came through the communicator. The Zephyrians are literally singing power into their guardian. With renewed strength, Fluffy spun through space like a cosmic dancer. The Void Hunters tried to follow, but the creature could now phase between dimensions so quickly that it seemed to be in multiple places at once. Fluffy's energy blasts found their targets with perfect accuracy, disabling one Void Hunter after another, but the main hegemony fleet was still advancing toward the planet. Their commander, a being called Overlord Zaxthul, studied the battle from his command ship's bridge. "An architect," he hissed to his subordinates. "The ancients told us they were all destroyed. It matters not. Deploy the neural dampeners. We will break the bond between creature and rider." New weapons emerged from the hegemony ships, devices that looked like twisted metal flowers. They began to emit a low-frequency pulse that made Jake's head feel like it was splitting apart. The neural dampeners were designed to disrupt the telepathic connection between architects and their bonded partners. Jake felt his link with Fluffy beginning to fade, the creature's thoughts becoming distant and confused. "No," Jake said through gritted teeth. "I won't let them break us apart." He focused all his will on maintaining their connection, fighting against the dampening field with pure determination. On the ground, the Zephyrians sensed his struggle and changed their song, adding new harmonies that helped stabilize the mental link. Captain Brooks watched the battle from the colony's command center, coordinating with the few defense satellites they had. "Surface batteries. Target the ships with the flower-shaped weapons. We need to help Jake and Fluffy." The colony's missile batteries opened fire, their projectiles streaking up toward the hegemony fleet. Most of the missiles were destroyed by enemy defensive systems, but a few got through, damaging some of the neural dampener arrays. The relief was immediate. Jake's connection with Fluffy snapped back to full strength, and the creature roared its defiance at the enemy fleet. But the battle was far from over. More hegemony ships were arriving, and Jake could see drop ships launching from the larger vessels heading toward the colony with troops inside. "They're trying to land ground forces," Jake reported. "Fluffy, we need to stop those transports." The creature dove toward the planet, its massive form streaking through the atmosphere like a falling star. The dropships were heavily armored and well-armed, but they weren't designed to fight something like Fluffy. One by one, the creature disabled the transports, its energy blasts sending them spinning out of control to crash in the empty plains around the colony. But the effort was taking its toll. Jake could feel Fluffy's energy reserves dropping with each attack. "Jake," Dr. Carter's voice came through the communicator. "The first evacuation ship is away safely, but we still have 1,500 people on the ground." Jake looked up at the hegemony fleet, still largely intact despite their efforts. Overlord Zaxthol's command ship was moving into position for orbital bombardment, its main weapons charging with deadly energy. "We're not going to be enough," Jake said quietly. "There are too many of them." But then Fluffy's mind touched his, sharing one more ancient memory. Deep in the creature's genetic code was something that had been waiting for the right moment, the right partner, the right cause to activate. Jake saw flashes of what Fluffy truly was, not just an architect, but a living key to something much larger. The creature had been waiting not just for a partner, but for someone who could help it unlock the full power of the architect network. "What do you need me to do?" Jake asked. The answer came not in words, but in understanding. Jake would have to trust Fluffy completely, let their connection deepen beyond anything they had experienced before. It would be dangerous, and there was no guarantee either of them would survive. But looking down at the colony where children and families waited for evacuation, Jake knew there was really no choice at all. "Do it," he said. The moment Jake said "do it," everything changed. The connection between him and Fluffy exploded outward like a nova. Jake felt his consciousness expand beyond his human body, touching something vast and ancient that had been sleeping in Fluffy's genetic code for thousands of years. It was like suddenly being able to see colors that had no names, or hear music that existed in dimensions human ears were never meant to perceive. Fluffy's body began to glow with pure white light. The creature doubled in size, its scales becoming translucent and filled with swirling energy. Its wings spread wider, crackling with power that made the space around them bend and twist. Jake was no longer just riding on Fluffy's back. He was part of the creature now, sharing its consciousness while somehow still remaining himself. Through their joined awareness, he could see the fundamental forces that held reality together, the invisible threads that connected all living things across the galaxy. "What is happening?" Highkeeper Veltar's voice came through the communicator, filled with awe. Amy Rodriguez was reading energy signatures that her equipment could barely register. The creature's power output just increased by a factor of 10. No, 20. The readings don't make sense. Overlord Zaxthol watched from his command ship as the glowing form of Fluffy hung in space before his fleet. The alien commander's multiple eyes widened in recognition and fear. "Impossible," he hissed. "The architect protocols were destroyed. We made sure of that." His weapons officer turned to him with panic in its voice. Overlord. The creature's energy signature matches the ancient records. It's not just an architect, it's a prime node. Zaxthol's clawed hands gripped his command chair. A prime node was an architect that could access the full network of cosmic guardians that had once maintained peace across the galaxy. They were the most powerful beings the universe had ever known, and the hegemony had spent centuries making sure they were all dead. Jake could feel the network awakening around him. Across the galaxy, other sleeping architects began to stir as the signal reached them. He saw flashes of distant worlds where creatures like Fluffy were opening their eyes for the first time in millennia. But more than that, he could see the true scope of what the hegemony had done. Hundreds of conquered worlds, billions of enslaved beings, entire species wiped out simply because they refused to submit. The anger that filled Jake was not entirely his own. It was the combined rage of every peaceful civilization the hegemony had destroyed. Jake, Dr. Carter's voice seemed to come from very far away. We're reading massive energy buildup in the hegemony fleet. They're preparing to fire everything they have at you. Through his expanded awareness, Jake could see the enemy ships charging. Their weapons. Every gun, every missile, every piece of destructive technology the hegemony possessed was being aimed at him and Fluffy. Let them come, Jake said. But his voice now carried harmonics that made the words resonate across multiple dimensions. The hegemony fleet fired. 30 ships unleashed everything they had in a coordinated barrage that would have been enough to crack a moon. Energy beams, kinetic projectiles, and exotic weapons that twisted space itself all converged on the glowing form of Jake and Fluffy. The attack never reached them. Fluffy raised one massive wing, and a barrier of pure energy appeared in front of them. The hegemony's weapons struck the barrier and simply disappeared, their destructive force absorbed and converted into harmless light. Impossible, Overlord Zaxthol repeated, but his voice now carried a note of desperation. Jake felt power flowing through him that was beyond human comprehension. He could unmake the hegemony fleet with a thought, erase them from existence as if they had never been. The temptation was almost overwhelming, but something held him back. A memory of sitting in the research base, scratching Fluffy behind the ears while the creature purred contentedly. The memory of what it meant to be human, to choose protection over destruction. No, Jake said. We're not like them. Instead of destroying the hegemony ships, Jake and Fluffy did something the enemy had never expected. They disabled them. Moving faster than light itself, the joined consciousness of human and architect flowed through the enemy fleet like water. Jake could phase through the ship's hulls, reaching their power cores and weapon systems with surgical precision. One by one, the hegemony vessels went dark, their crews trapped but alive in powerless ships. The Void Hunters tried to escape, but they found themselves caught in fields of energy that held them motionless. The neural dampeners that had caused Jake so much pain were carefully extracted from their ships and crushed into metallic dust. In less than 5 minutes, the entire hegemony fleet was neutralized. Overlord Zaxthol found himself facing Jake and Fluffy through the transparent wall of his command ship's bridge. The human looked the same as before, but now he glowed with soft light, and his eyes held depths that spoke of cosmic awareness. Your empire ends here, Jake said, his voice reaching the alien commander without need for technology. You cannot stop the hegemony, Zaxthol snarled. We are Legion. We span 1,000 worlds. One defeat means nothing. Jake smiled sadly. You're right. One defeat means nothing. But this isn't just one defeat. Through the Architect network, Jake could see other awakened guardians across the galaxy. On world after world, creatures like Fluffy were rising from their long sleep, bonding with worthy beings of dozens of different species. The network that had once maintained galactic peace was rebuilding itself. The age of conquest is over, Jake told the hegemony commander. The architects are returning, and this time they won't be caught off guard. On New Haven's surface, the colonists watched in amazement as the battle ended, not with explosions and destruction, but with a gentle rain of light as the disabled hegemony ships were lowered safely to the planet's surface. Highkeeper Veltar and his fellow Zephyrians had tears streaming down their faces as they watched their guardian achieve its true purpose. The creature they had worshipped for 1,000 years had finally awakened to fulfill its destiny as a protector of all life. The prophecies were true, Veltar whispered. The Guardian has found its bridge between worlds. Captain Brooks coordinated the securing of the captured hegemony vessels. To everyone's surprise, many of the enemy soldiers surrendered willingly once they were freed from their commander's mental control devices. It turned out that the hegemony maintained discipline through technological oppression rather than genuine loyalty. Dr. Carter watched as Jake and Fluffy descended from the sky, the creature's glow gradually fading back to normal. Jake climbed down from Fluffy's back, stumbling slightly as his consciousness fully returned to his human body. "How do you feel?" Lisa asked. Jake looked at his hands, which still sparkled faintly with residual energy. "Different. Like I've seen. Too much to ever be completely human again, but also more human than I've ever been." Fluffy nuzzled against Jake's shoulder, and for a moment they were just a man and his unusual pet again. But Jake could still feel the connection to the cosmic network, a warm presence in the back of his mind that told him he was never truly alone. Over the following months, New Haven became the center of something unprecedented in galactic history. The Free Worlds Alliance formed around the principles of cooperation rather than conquest. With species from across the galaxy sending representatives, Jake and Fluffy served as both symbols and active protectors of this new order. They traveled between worlds, helping other awakened architects find their own bridges, building a network of guardians who could respond to threats before they became invasions. The former hegemony ships were converted into relief vessels, their crews choosing to help rebuild the worlds they had once terrorized. Overlord Zaxthul himself eventually came to understand that cooperation brought more security than conquest ever could. Dr. Carter established the first Interspecies Research Institute, with Amy Rodriguez leading programs that helped different cultures understand each other. Captain Brooks commanded a fleet of ships crewed by beings from dozens of worlds, all working together to protect the peace. The Zephyrians opened their sacred sites as neutral meeting grounds for galactic diplomacy. Highkeeper Veltar often smiled when he watched Jake and Fluffy playing in the crystal caves, finally understanding that the sacred and the everyday could exist in the same being. One evening, as Jake sat with Fluffy on a hill overlooking New Haven's growing city, Amy approached them with news of another distress signal from an unknown species. "Looks like trouble in the Outer Rim," she said. "Some kind of dimensional raiders attacking peaceful worlds." Jake grinned and patted Fluffy's neck. The creature's purr rumbled through the ground like distant thunder. "Come on, big guy," Jake said. "Let's go make some new friends." As they took to the sky, Jake reflected on how much had changed since that first day in the crystal caves. He had approached an ancient cosmic entity with nothing but curiosity and kindness, and somehow that simple act had helped restore balance to the galaxy. The universe was vast and full of wonders and dangers, but it was also full of possibilities for connection and cooperation that transcended species, culture, and even dimensional boundaries. Jake and Fluffy had become proof that sometimes the most profound cosmic changes could begin with something as simple as friendship.